Titanic. In 1996, the North Atlantic lay flat and metallic beneath a hard white sky, as if it had never swallowed anything at all. From the deck of the research vessel Akademik Mstislav Keldysh, Brock Lovett watched the sea with the fixed intensity of a man who believed it owed him something. Below him, monitors flickered with greenish light, relaying the ghostly feed from a remote submersible drifting 2.5 miles down. The Titanic emerged in pieces across the screens, railings furred with rust, chandeliers collapsed into coral-encrusted halos, a grand piano folded in on itself like a broken ribcage. "Easy," Brock murmured into his headset. "Bring her around, starboard." The sub's lights washed over a cabin wall. A safe loomed from the silt. Someone behind him let out a low whistle. "If that's not promising, I don't know what is." They brought the safe up 2 days later, barnacled and stubborn. The crew gathered as it was pried open with careful impatience. Mud slopped onto the deck, a soggy stack of papers, a pocket watch, and then... "Hold up," Brock said. One of the technicians lifted a drawing free from the slurry. Even warped by water, the charcoal lines were delicate and sure. A young woman reclined on a sofa, her expression unguarded, her eyes luminous. Around her neck hung a heavy necklace, an extravagant blue stone cut in the shape of a heart. The date, still legible at the bottom, April 14, 1912. The day the ship struck the iceberg. Brock stared at the drawing as if it might blink back at him. "That's it," he whispered, "the heart of the ocean." A week later, after the sketch made the news, the satellite phone rang. Her voice was dry and steady. "I was 17 when that picture was drawn." That was how Rose Dawson Calvert came aboard the Keldysh, small, white-haired, wrapped in a lavender coat that fluttered around her like a stubborn memory. Her granddaughter Lizzie hovered nearby, protective but curious. Brock tried to hide his disappointment. The woman in the drawing had been all youth and defiance. This woman's hands trembled slightly as she accepted a cup of tea. "You're telling us," he said carefully, "that you're the girl in the sketch." Rose's eyes, pale but piercing, met his. "I'm telling you," she replied, "that I remember the smell of the ocean the night the Titanic sank. I remember the sound it made." She leaned back in her chair, and the present loosened its grip. Southampton, 1912. The Titanic rose from the harbour like a city unto itself, her hull black and immense, her 4 funnels bright against the spring sky. Rose DeWitt Bucator stood on the dock in a travelling suit of pale grey, her hat pinned precisely, her gloves spotless. Beside her, her mother Ruth adjusted her own hat with clipped efficiency. "Stand up straight," Ruth murmured without looking at her daughter. "You represent this family." Rose's gaze drifted upward, to the rows of portholes, to the polished railings, to the sheer, suffocating magnificence of it all. Caledon Hockley appeared at her side, immaculate in a tailored coat. He smiled the way men did when they believed everything before them already belonged to them. "You're going to adore it," he said, taking her arm. "Paris in April, you'll see." Rose managed a smile that never reached her eyes. Inside, the ship gleamed. The first-class reception room shimmered with carved wood and gold detailing. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and expensive perfume. Stewards whisked trunks away as if by magic. At dinner that first evening, Rose sat between Cal and a steel magnate whose mustache seemed to enter a room before he did. Crystal chimed. Conversation hummed about markets and railroads and the unshakable future. "Freud," Cal scoffed at one point, swirling his brandy. "The man sees sex in everything." Rose stared at her plate. Later that night the deck was nearly empty. The ocean stretched out, black and infinite. Rose gripped the stern rail, her breath ragged. "I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a crowded room," she whispered to the wind, "screaming at the top of my lungs, and no one even looks up." She climbed the railing before she could think better of it. "Don't," a voice said softly behind her. She turned. A young man stood there, hair the color of sunlight caught in dust, his coat worn but his stance steady. If you jump, he said, I'll have to jump in after you, and I'm not a particularly good swimmer. Despite herself, Rose let out a startled laugh. I'm serious, he went on. It'd be a terrible inconvenience for both of us. His name was Jack Dawson. He had won his ticket in a poker game 5 minutes before the ship sailed. He had charcoal under his fingernails and a grin that suggested the world was not nearly as intimidating as it liked to pretend. She let him help her down. From that night on, the ship rearranged itself around them. He showed her the third-class deck, where fiddles scraped out wild, joyful music and laughter spilled like wine. She kicked off her shoes and tried to follow the steps of a reel, breathless and flushed, the world suddenly unpinned from its careful frame. You're amazing, Jack said, watching her. I'm not, she replied. I'm just pretending to be. They walked the promenade at dusk, shoulder to shoulder. He sketched her as she leaned against a lifeboat, her face softer than it ever appeared at dinner. He spoke of Paris bridges and sleeping under the stars and painting for the sheer joy of it. You're afraid, he told her one afternoon not unkindly, of being swallowed up. She studied him, and you're not afraid of anything. Oh, I am, he said. I just don't let it tell me what to do. The night he drew her in her stateroom, the world narrowed to charcoal and candlelight. The heart of the ocean lay cool against her skin. Jack's hands were steady, his voice not quite. Look at me, he said gently. She did. Afterward, footsteps pounded in the corridor, Lovejee's sharp knock slicing through the hush. They ran, breathless and laughing, ducking through service corridors and down into the cargo hold. There, hidden among crates and polished automobiles, they found a pocket of silence. Rose touched his face as if memorizing it. The car windows fogged over, blurring the world beyond. Outside, the engines throbbed steadily on. Then came the shudder. At first it felt like nothing, an odd vibration beneath the soles of her shoes. But the engines slowed, the music above faltered. On the forward deck, ice lay scattered like broken porcelain. Officers spoke in tight, clipped tones. 5 compartments breached. It's not possible. Cal found the sketch before Rose could hide it. His fury was quiet, which was worse. You think this is a game, he demanded, holding up the drawing. You embarrass me for this gutter rat. The next morning, Jack was arrested for stealing the necklace. Lovejoy had planted it neatly in his coat pocket. The betrayal was almost elegant. As water crept through the lower decks, Rose ran through corridors now humming with unease. Stewards urged calm. Just a precaution, miss. In the master at arms office, she found Jack handcuffed to a pipe, water already licking at the floor. You're so stupid, Rose, he said, relief flooding his face at the sight of her. Why'd you come back? She found the key after frantic searching, hands shaking. When the cuffs finally snapped free, the ship gave a low, terrible groan. On deck, lifeboats swung out over the dark. Women and children only, an officer barked. Cal seized her shoulders. Get in the boat, I'll see you in New York. His coat settled around her shoulders, heavy. As the lifeboat descended, Rose looked up. Jack stood at the railing, smaller with every inch of rope unspooling. She made her choice. She leapt back onto the deck. Rose, Cal's voice cracked into something almost unrecognizable. They ran as the ship tilted, as china shattered and chandeliers swung. Water chased them down the grand staircase in a glittering wall. Cal fired his pistol once, twice, wild, furious shots swallowed by the chaos. He stopped eventually, the enormity of the sea overtaking even his rage. The bow plunged, the stern rose, stranding hundreds against the sky. Jack and Rose clung to the railing, breath frosting in the night air. Hold on, he whispered. The ship split with a sound like the world tearing. In the water, the cold was immediate and absolute. Rose's scream vanished into steam. Jack found a piece of debris and hauled her onto it. Get up there, he insisted. "You're so stupid, Rose, why'd you do that?" She clutched his hand. "Listen to me," he said, voice thinning. "You're going to get out of here, you're going to have Barbies and watch them grow. You're going to die an old woman warm in your bed, not here." "I can't." "You can, promise me." "I promise," she said through chattering teeth. His grip loosened before she understood what was happening. A lifeboat returned at last, slicing through the floating silence. When they pulled her in, she did not look back. The Carpathia's decks were crowded with blankets and grief. Rose saw Cal scanning faces, desperation finally stripping him bare. She turned away, lifting her chin. "Name?" an officer asked as she boarded in New York. She hesitated only a second. "Dawson," she said, "Rose Dawson." On the Keldysh, the room was silent when she finished. Brock cleared his throat. "Did you ever see him again, Cal?" "He found me once," she said, "but the world changed, so did I." She looked out the porthole at the Atlantic. "He lost everything in the crash of 29, shot himself, I read about it in the paper." "And the necklace?" Brock asked softly. Rose only smiled. That night, alone on the stern of the Keldysh, she stood where sea met starlight. From her pocket she drew the heart of the ocean, its blue fire catching the moon. "For you, Jack," she murmured. The stone slipped from her fingers, falling into the black, down toward the rusted bones of the ship. In her cabin, photographs lined the dresser. Rose astride a horse at Santa Monica Pier, Rose in a pilot's cap beside a small plane, Rose laughing in front of a Model T, a life lived loudly. She lay back in bed, closing her eyes. In her dreams the Titanic was whole again. Light flooded the grand staircase, music swelled, the clock read 2:20. At the top of the steps stood Jack, hands in his pockets, grinning as if she had only kept him waiting a moment. She walked toward him. Around them the passengers and crew, those who had not reached the lifeboats, watched in quiet applause. "Welcome back," he said. And she was home.